Good evening, everyone. It's Thursday, 17th of August, 2023. It's approximately 7:10 p.m. My apologies, starting a little later than scheduled. I'm Bishop Dr. Desmond Jadu. I'm chairman of the Windrush National Organization, and welcome to our monthly engagement meeting with the Home Office. As we normally do, we start with prayer. Reverend Clive isn't with us this evening, so at this time, I'm just going to ask you, please bow your heads if you wish to join us in prayer. Heavenly Father, we just thank you for bringing us together today. Father, let this meeting be fruitful and productive. Father, let us look at the cause, which is seeking justice for the Windrush generation, and let us continue to build bridges. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Right. As I've said, I'm Bishop Desmond Jadu. I'm joined by fellow directors of the WNO and some of our colleagues who are part of the Windrush National Organization as well. Welcome to you. Our agenda this evening, we have an agenda whereby I'll start off by telling you about what we're doing as WNO. There'll be a presentation from the Home Office. Round about 7:40, 7:45, we'll open up for Q&A until 8:20. We'll have closing remarks and we'll close at 8:30 p.m. First of all, I'd like to thank people who turned up to the Cannon Street Memorial Baptist Church for leg 2 of our national tour, which took place on the 1st of August. We had approximately 150 to 180 people in the main auditorium, and I understand there was quite a long queue for people to speak to the Home Office, and I need to publicly thank the Home Office because we were scheduled to finish at 8:30, but they stayed and attempted to see everyone, and I think we ended up leaving the building at about 9:45, and the Home Office staff had to make their way back to Sheffield, and I understand they all got home safely, and they were driving as well. So thank you for showing that extra dedication. We need to give credit where credit's due, so thank you very much for that. We have our next leg 3 of our public face-to-face meetings, which will be on Tuesday, 29th of August at the Village Fellowship at 57 Wednesbury Road in Walsall in the West Midlands. And then on Tuesday, the 19th of September, we will be having our leg 4, which will be in Nottingham, and that will be at the Pilgrim Church, which is in Meadows in Nottingham, Queen's Drive rather, in Nottingham. And then we've penciled in, the Home Office aren't aware of this yet. We're trying to pencil in a date for the 10th of October, which is going to be either Leicester or Bedford. We're just waiting for confirmation on that at the moment. In addition to that, on our activities, we are heading up to Scotland tomorrow for a Windrush event where we'll be speaking to campaigners in Scotland about having legs of our tour in Glasgow, Edinburgh, and I've been told Dundee or Aberdeen, but we're waiting. We know definitely Glasgow and Edinburgh, so we're going up there tomorrow to do the forward trips as well. And we've had requests from Bristol, Manchester, Liverpool as well. So we are starting to get the dates around the country in place at the moment. Just to let you know, last month we have several questions for the Home Office, but we've had an issue whereby we're updating our website and we haven't collated everything to go to the Home Office, which after this meeting we'll collect them over the weekend and send them into the Home Office. So please, no criticism of the Home Office, that's my responsibility. But our website as well is being updated because we've had comments back, and we have our international conference coming up, which is on the 27th of October, and that will be at the Edgbaston Park Hotel and Conference Centre in Birmingham. And I'm pleased to say the whole morning will be dedicated to Windrush status and compensation and additional issues. Now, during our journey over the past 5 years, we have picked up additional issues facing the Windrush generation, issues surrounding housing, health and social care, wealth management and retention, and also workers' rights as well. So in the afternoon, we'll be having workshops and inputs from the appropriate professionals with regard to that. The financial wealth management is something that we've listened to people about, because one thing we are concerned about, We are aware, despite what many want to say, some people are getting six-figure compensation offers. And when they receive that money, they require assistance in ensuring that they manage it to make the most out of it. And that's why we're not telling people where to go. It's giving people an opportunity just to have a listen and see what can be done in terms of their wealth management. Health and social care, for example, is an important aspect because some people have suffered trauma, and it's how we help them to get back onto their feet. Some people will not get back on their feet, some of them because of their age, for example, and it's how do we ensure that the cultural requirements of their care is met. That's just two examples of what we're going to be discussing at the conference in the afternoon. Then on the evening, we will have our gala dinner, where we're raising funds for the Windrush Welfare Fund. Tickets for that will be £60, and they are available now. Just email us at our website, and we will take care of the rest. We will have Eventbrite links, etc., for that also. Now, one of the things that we've been working on in terms of the Windrush has been people born after 1983 who are having difficulties. I'm pleased to say that we are making headway, and I think thank you to the Home Office for listening to my representations. They have looked into this, and there are issues that need addressing, and they are being addressed. So I think it's a call out tonight, really, for anyone who was born after 1983. Let them get in touch, and let's make that referral to the Home Office, and let's see if we can get them sorted out. There's some people in their 30s, early 40s who are having difficulties getting passports for one reason and the other. We need to sort that out, and that's what we're about dealing with this issue. The other thing which has been, Bev, questions will come up in the Q&A session. The other issue that we do have is we need to get more people forward. Now, last week in one of my surgeries, a gentleman came in, he's Jamaican, came here as a child, he's got some stamps in his passport, his Jamaican passport has run out, and he has no documentation, nothing at all. He's just about got himself the new Jamaican birth certificate, but he has no naturalization certificate. He hasn't got a British passport. He wants to renew his Jamaican passport so that he wants to go to Jamaica next year. So that is an example of people who have not come forward. And we've still got quite a few people, particularly from the Caribbean, who have not got their status. So it's really, we need to be encouraging people to come forward to get their status. There's a lot of people out there, and these people, they're aged between 55 and 75 years old. We know what the age group is now. So we've identified it, and we do need to encourage those people to come forward as well. So that's the update from WNO. And now I am going to hand over to, from the Home Office, even we've got Marion Mason, Nigel Hills, and we got Joanne Bell as well. Just the three of you. Is that right?
Yeah, that's
okay.
Right, yeah.
So
can I just ask for you to give Nigel permission, because my formatting's not coming across on my iPad, so I won't be able to share my...
I think Nigel has permission already, yes.
Right, so can Nigel share, because I can't... I've got formatting issues on the PowerPoint.
Yeah, don't worry, I'll pick it
up.
up.
Okay, thank you.
No problem at all. So I'll hand over to Nigel if you just want to reintroduce your team, and over to you.
So our team will say a bit more about themselves when they come online, but just as an overview, so obviously I'm Nigel Hills. Good evening, everybody. I'm the head of the Windrush schemes. So what that means is I lead the Windrush compensation scheme, but I'm also accountable for the Windrush status scheme, where people apply for documents to confirm their lawful right to be in the UK. And we'll talk about those a little bit. We've got a brief presentation just to take you through what the schemes offer and how you can apply. We've also got a short video to start, if it works. I'm not actually sure whether that'll work on my machine. Hopefully it will, but we'll try that, because we heard last time the questions about trying to make these presentations a little bit more accessible. So this has got subtitles, and so hopefully hopefully it'll work. So wish us luck with that. So before we start, I wanted just to cover a couple of lines, and then I'll hand over to Marianne. Marianne Mason is, some of you will know her. She heads up all of the front end vulnerable person helpline and the engagement teams. She's a member of my senior management team. And Joe Bell, again, many of you will have met Joe from our frontline engagement team, who you will have seen at many of our events. So between them, they'll deliver a short presentation. So first off, what I'd like to say, Bishop Jadu asked me to address straight on. There was an article in the Independent in the last few days that suggested, well, said that the Home Office was scaling back the Windrush compensation scheme. That is not correct. We are not, I am not scaling back the Windrush compensation scheme. There is no end date still for the scheme. The caseworkers that I have recruited, who I spoke about in the last session, we're keeping them and we're backfilling them if and when any of them leave on promotion or what have you. Where that story came from, we think, is that there was a letter that Lord Murray sent in response to a number of different things, and it talked about, some of you might remember in very meetings many months ago, we talked about initially the projection for the scheme was something like 15,000 people, but we're working out how many would come from the Windrush status scheme. But those projections have been reviewed, and the one they're talking about was reviewed way back when, about 2020, when we revised our thinking that it would not be as many as 15,000, it'd be more like 4,000 to 6,000. But to be really clear, that is not a cap on how many people can apply to the scheme. That is not scaling back the scheme. It's only a planning assumption around why and how we think and where people will move into the compensation scheme. So it caused a bit of a fuss this week with a suggestion that we might be scaling back, or in fact in a Action for Race Equality press release, I think yesterday or earlier on, they suggested we might even be considering closing the scheme. That is emphatically not the case. And I can give you my 100% assurance that is not where we are. So my apologies that caused some concern and some worry this week. But I just want to reassure you that that is not where we are. We're not, we've got no end date. We're not closing down the scheme. The other thing I wanted to mention just before we go on to the brief presentation is there has been a little bit of confusion. There's been a couple of letters this week. I mentioned at the last meeting that when we make a decision on either a Windrush compensation or a status application, we apply a thing called the balance of probabilities. That's a good thing. It means we don't actually have to get to a criminal standard. So a criminal standard is beyond reasonable doubt. That's a high standard. All we need to be aware of when the caseworker makes the decision is that it's more likely than not that the thing happens. So you'll hear it talked about as 51% or more likely than not is the best way to describe it. So the caseworker just needs to work with whoever applies to get the information, the documentation, the detail, just to be satisfied that it's more likely than not that it happened. Now that was slightly, I think, misquoted as if it's probable it's true, I think I saw in a particular exchange. So there is you have to, if you apply, you do have to give something, and we will work with you with other government departments and, to get information, evidence, detail, and we accept that people might not have a lot of that information from many years ago, but we do have to get to that point where there's a balance that can be made, a decision can be made that it's more likely than not. So hopefully that's helpful. That is what I said last time, but I appreciate that that could have come over and may have been misunderstood. So I just wanted to clarify that. So I'm going to try and get this presentation up. Can you see that?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Hey, that's a very good start then. So I've actually got some, oh yeah, so can you see that clearly?
Yeah, that's
Yes.
fine.
Yeah. So on the agenda, we're obviously going to go through the Windrush documentation scheme, as I said, the Windrush compensation scheme. And I think at this point, Marianne, am I handing over to you?
Yes, thank you. Good evening, everybody. Thank you for having us join the call this evening. As always, it's a pleasure to come and meet with people that we've met before, and of course, new people that I haven't met. So yeah, thanks. So we're just going to run through, Joe and I, just a few things for people who maybe don't know as much about the scheme, and also give you a couple of other updates as well. So the agenda is the Windrush documentation scheme, and then the Windrush compensation scheme, and we'll cover eligibility, the categories that people can claim under, and also claimant assistance. Also within the Windrush compensation scheme, we have a vulnerable persons team supporting those who are vulnerable, and so we'll just cover off that as well, and then very importantly, obviously, how to apply. So at the last session here, as Nigel has mentioned, we did take some comments about a question about accessibility, and I've had a meeting, Joe and I, with somebody within the organisation, and so we wanted to try to include this tonight, which is following some feedback about having different offerings during the presentation, but also that this is subtitled, so we're trying to work on that accessibility, and we'll be making more considerations of that moving forward. So Nigel, I don't know if you're able to start this.
I shall try.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is David, and I'm part of the Windrush team. Hi, my name is Adam, and I'm part of our response to Windrush. Many people who settled lawfully in the UK before the end of 1988 have the right to live and work here. But some do not have the correct documents to show this. As a result, they may have found it hard to demonstrate their right to work and access services in the UK. Two schemes have been set up to right the wrongs they experienced: the Windrush scheme and the Windrush compensation scheme. Applications to both are free. The Windrush teams will treat everything you tell them with sensitivity and care. Nothing you tell us will be passed on to immigration enforcement. The Windrush scheme was set up to help people get the documents they need to demonstrate their right to live and work in the UK. If you have any questions about the Windrush scheme, you can call the helpline for free on 0800 678 1925. They can offer support, guidance, and information on how to apply. The second scheme is called the Windrush compensation scheme. It is designed to compensate people who suffered or lost out on things because they couldn't demonstrate their right to live in the UK. If this describes your experience, you can claim for things like loss of earnings, loss of access to benefits, medical costs, and the broader impact this has had on your lives. Ultimately, we want to make sure you get the compensation you deserve for the difficulties you have faced. More information on both schemes, including eligibility, can be found on gov.uk/Windrush, or you can call the Windrush helpline for free on 0800 678 1925.
Thank you. Okay, so that was just covering, obviously, a little bit of information about the schemes, and we're going to start, as I said, with the Windrush documentation scheme. So obviously this scheme has been set up for quite a while now, and we naturally still have people coming forward, and the work that the advocates are doing within the communities and the presentations that we're going and undertaking, we are seeing more people coming forward for the documentation scheme. There was a question at the last meeting around how long does it take for somebody to conclude their claim under the documentation scheme once they've submitted it. And there's a few things that have to happen within the documentation scheme, one of which is to enrol biometrics, and that can be done at different areas across the UK. And we also have a mobile function within the vulnerable persons team where we go and take biometrics from people who are unable to travel and have different difficulties actually accessing the centres. But once those biometrics have been taken and all the information has been provided that's requested to the caseworker, the Windrush documentation claims are taken from that point about 4 weeks. So it can be quite a quick turnaround if people are able to provide the information and get their biometrics taken. So I'll just move into now what the documentation scheme is for. So as it says here, it helps people to access documentation they need help with. And obviously, as Nigel has mentioned, both the schemes are free schemes. And the people who would be eligible are the Commonwealth citizens settled in the UK by 1973 and any children born here or came here before the age of 18. And importantly, it's continued to have lived in the UK. And then it's for anyone else who's arrived in the UK by 1989 and who is now settled here. Just wanted to point out in the next part of the slide as well that Commonwealth citizens settled in the UK by 1973, but who are no longer settled in the UK, may also make a free application to return to live in the UK permanently. Now, the important part here to know is if they have close and continuing ties to the UK. And just to set some information out there, currently we have had over 16,200 people issued with documentation through the Windrush documentation scheme confirming their status or British citizenship. So the status element, because some people have asked, well, what does the status mean? So obviously that's things like settled status, or people may know that as indefinite leave to remain, British citizenship, naturalisation, and so on. Thank you, Nigel. Next slide. I'll hand over to Jo now, who'll talk about the compensation scheme.
Right. Does it come across to me, or do I just, is it okay for me?
If you just let me know when you want to move on, Jo.
Yeah, so if we stay on this slide, we're fine.
Yeah.
Right, so the Windrush compensation scheme was launched in 2019. So as you're all probably aware, is that the scandal came about in April 2018, and what we recognised is that a lot of people had a serious impact as a result of not being able to demonstrate their status. So the scheme was set up in April 2019, and the premise of the scheme was to actually compensate people of any nationality that had entered the UK before 1989 and got lawful status, but because of their lawful status, they'd experienced some form of loss. So when we were creating the scheme, what we tried to do was actually cover as many people as possible. So on the screen, I can show you there that there's 3 types of claimants. So we tried to break it down into the scenarios, the individuals. So we've got the primary claimant. So that would be you, a person that has actually experienced a loss because they couldn't prove their right to stay in the UK. And unfortunately, what we've come across is that due to the nature of the time when people enter the UK, we've got people that are now no longer with us. So we've actually got, you can actually make a claim against the estate. So that's the representative of the estate of a deceased claimant. And that's if the claimant had actually had a loss due to that. And then also we've got a close family claim. So I can see a typo on there, we've not swapped it around. So the close family claim. So if you are either a partner, child, or brother or sister of the claimant, and then you've actually experienced a loss. So if I apologise for that. Next slide, Nigel. So how many people have helped? So far we've, on the compensation scheme, we've dealt with approximately 6,000 claims. 70% of those have gone to full and final. As of June, we've made a payment to over 77 million, and then we've offered 77 million, and 65 million have been paid. So the difference between the two is where people are actually waiting to accept the offer, or they're pending review, and we can explain that later. So just in June alone, we've paid 2.9 million. So when we're actually, that's fine, yeah. So when we've actually talked about categories, so what we would normally, what we've tried to do is cover all the scenarios covered under the scheme. So we've got immigration fees, you know, if you've been detained, unfortunately, or removed from the UK because you've not been able to demonstrate your status, then these can be, you can make a claim. So on the screen, we've got quite a few categories there that would happen, that could possibly happen. And within the scheme, what we've actually designed, we've got a tariff in majority of those categories. So you can claim if you've experienced a loss because of your status, you can make a claim under any of those categories. Nigel's mentioned the balance of probability, because what we've recognised is that because people have not been able to, sorry, is that me? Because people have not been able to demonstrate their status, they've not been able to hold on to documents, what's happened is that we've actually, we've recognised that people have struggled to provide documents. So for example, if somebody had actually not been able to continue with their employment due to their status, then they may not have actually kept all the letters. So what we do is we have access to HMRC, we may be able to work with you, with the caseworkers to contact employers, etc. And then what we will do under various categories, we will exercise what Nigel has mentioned about balance of probability. So as Nigel explained, if in the absence of documentation or minimum documentation, if we are convinced that it's a 51% that the event did occur, then we would actually consider whether it's appropriate for us to make a payment. And when I do these presentations, I always say the one that I've always worked on and tried to give you as much information as is impact on life. And that is that we've recognised that all of these events would have been traumatic for anybody who was unable to demonstrate the status. So, but when we actually looked at the scheme, we've actually want to actually acknowledge that the trauma and the emotional trauma that's happened. So we've got a category called the impact on life, and that category talks about the emotional trauma. So for example, if you have missed events, etc., or a breakdown of relationships, etc., then we would actually look at that and do an impact. And the little bit sort of says that we acknowledge that payments, it does take some time for a case to go forward. So what we've done is we've built in from feedback from everybody that we've if we can actually from the initial moment of us receiving a payment, receiving a claim, and if we can make a payment, then we will make a payment, and this is called the preliminary reward. So when we receive an application, if we can see that there was a clear, unequivocal that we will be making an impact on life payment, then we will release that to you as soon as possible, and that's 10,000. Next slide, please. Can I hand over to Marianne?
You're on mute, Marianne.
There we go. Apologies, the I've lost the slide deck.
Don't me to, shall I pick it up?
It's about claimant assistance. I can see it's claimant assistance, so and I'm happy to do that. So the claimant assistance can be offered. We have a contract with We Are Digital. That contract's running until June next year, and we are looking at currently at options for going out to tender for claimant assistance moving forward. The people can go direct to We Are Digital, or they can come through the help team. And of course, you know, on this call, speaking to Action for Race Equality today, and speaking with other stakeholders, we know that obviously there are also many people out there who are advocating and supporting people to complete their claims as well, and including, you know, many of you on this call this evening. So that's the information on that slide is about We Are Digital. And then the vulnerable persons team. So the vulnerable persons team can assist people where they need more detailed assistance and won't just go through the process as simply as others. And this may be people need support with accessing benefits, need support with trying to get appointments with housing, potentially returning to the UK, and also sometimes just support with assisting with trying to organise people to support them with debt management and things like being evicted and supporting people who are in difficult situations with their housing. So we have mobile biometrics, and I did mention the mobile biometrics team earlier with the status applications. So again, just to reiterate, this is only for status, not for the Windrush compensation scheme, but we do have a couple of people who can go out and collect biometrics from people either in their homes or in care homes or other locations if people aren't able to travel to the centres. And we have urgent exceptional payments within that team. And on the slide, and I'm sorry, I can't see that, but on the slide it gives details of how many people have been supported through the vulnerable persons team, and also the payments that have been made with the urgent exceptional payments.
Very good. Considering you can't see it, that was spot on. And then the last slide is the contact details. And Bishop Jadu, as last time, we can share a PDF of this, although I think you may have it, or at least most of this from the Birmingham presentation, but we can, after this event, we'll share a PDF of this and you can upload it alongside this meeting. And that was all from us, I think. But maybe I can just say in closing that although we talked about the numbers there, 77 million paid or offered, I was challenged at the Windrush National Organisation Conference. This is not about us saying that we're particularly efficient. There's a lot more work to do, and we recognise that we want to work with individuals. We appreciate that opening up the detail of these experiences is very traumatic, and we want to work with people and work through that with people. And the emphasis with all of our teams is to get the maximum award available at the earliest point, possible. I'm not actually sure, sorry, how I stop. Oh no, how I stop sharing. Yeah, there we go.
Sorry, Nigel, as well, can I just mention, apologies, I meant to mention the Community Engagement Fund, and there is a question I've just seen about that. So the Community Engagement Fund, up until the end of April for this year, 23 to 24, launched on the 1st of August. There's been a couple of sessions, awareness sessions about that, and I know some people have joined those sessions in the last week. If people are interested in looking about, into the Community Engagement Fund, then that information can be shared with them by going on to find a grant, and we can also add that information to the slides when we share that if people want to have a look at that. It's not come through to the engagement team, but it is going to be administered by the engagement team, so my team, and not Voice for Change. There was a question there about excluding the Caribbean community. This this round of Community Engagement Fund is to make sure that awareness is raised within communities. It does say that it wanting to also look at extending that beyond the Caribbean community, but that doesn't exclude the Caribbean community. So, for example, raising awareness and information to the other Commonwealth countries, including South Asia, etc. And the closing date is the end of August, I think the 29th of August, for applications to the fund. So I just wanted to mention the Community Engagement Fund that's been launched. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, everyone. Thank you for that, and thank you, Nigel, for addressing my request, that issue regarding the publicity regarding the Windrush scheme as well. So we're at Q&A session now. I don't know, Lorna, if you're still with us, do you mind chipping in with the questions? Do you just want to cover the questions that's in the chat for me before we go to live questions? Is she there? No? Okay.
I'm here. Yeah, I'm here. I'm here.
So do you just want to pick up on the comments in the chat first of all, please, and then we'll go to live questions, giving people an opportunity to put their hands up.
Right, yeah, okay. So we've had the Marion, thank you, Marion, for answering the question about the Caribbean. And we've had something about the video about, hang on, has there been from Tanika, has there been a policy update on not passing applicants' information on to enforcement team now, according to the video?
So,
do you want to say that, Marianne?
yeah, so there hasn't been any policy update. It's a process within our teams that we don't share information, and the enforcement teams don't have access to our systems either. And an example of that would be, say, for example, if an enforcement team picked somebody up through, you know, part of their work, that may be that they go into an employer and they pick somebody up and say, can you show me your papers, etc. If they contact the Windrush teams, then we are able to take information about the person, and where we consider that there is eligibility for the schemes, we tell them that they're not able to continue to hold that person, as an example. And also we won't give any information or follow up on that person with them. So that information just stays with us and within our teams. And as I said, we don't share any information about people who are coming to us through Windrush, and also people who are coming to us at events and they aren't eligible for Windrush, but obviously they ask for advice about how can they look to regularise their status and their stay if they've overstayed in the UK, and we give advice on signposting them where they can go to, but we don't take any details. And I just wanted also to mention that any calls and contact to the help team, people don't have to give their full name and information if they're just wanting to make an inquiry. And if it's just a first line inquiry, we don't take information and mark that up on the systems.
Can I just add in there very quickly? At our meeting in Birmingham 2 weeks ago, I think there were 4 overstayers, and their information has gone no further. They did speak to the Home Office, and to my knowledge, their information has gone no further than the people that they spoke to at that point. I can only tell you how I find it, but it's just to add a bit of reassurance that an undertaking has been given. And to date, as an organisation, all the meetings we've had and overstayers have attended those meetings, all those people are still in the country at the moment. But that's all I can say. So back to you, Lorna, regarding the chat.
Yeah, so in the chat also, Tanika asked if that's the same, if it's offered to claimants based overseas.
So if what's offered to claimants overseas?
Sorry,
well,
I'm just on my mic and explain what that one is, if you're okay.
Yeah.
Says Lorna.
Tanika, you wait your turn because Richard had his hand up first.
No, she's reading my question to Nigel them, so I was just going to explain that question.
Wait your turn.
Let's do it orderly, so everyone's got their hand up. Lorna, bypass that question. Tanika can come in and ask those. Are there any other questions in the chat?
You missed your opportunity, Tanika. You should have made it clear in the chat. No, come in afterwards. So
Yeah.
Gertrude has got a question about unfortunately, if you are Windrush victim stuck in Nigeria, your application is likely to be rejected. And it's happened to her family and friends who were all settled here before 1973. And she has been saying this for 5 years, and she has a dossier of evidence. She doesn't want to bother speaking at the meeting, but she just really requests justice for her relatives.
Okay, so we'll treat that as a comment. Thanks.
Yeah, is the process of returning, this is from Roland, is the processing of returning residence visas 4 weeks as well?
Yes. And Roland, you asked that question at the last meeting, and I think the question was if all information is available, once biometrics is clear, then those claims should be dealt with very quickly, same as Marianne said.
Mm-hmm. And Katie Wilson Downey has asked 2.9 million to whom? Windrush victims or Europeans who are not Windrush victims?
So it'll be 2.9 million to people who are eligible for the Windrush compensation scheme.
And have been impacted because they didn't have status.
Yeah. So those people who have suffered a loss or a detriment due to an inability to demonstrate their lawful status in the UK.
Okay.
And the 2.9 million, I think, Katie Wilson Downey, I think you're referring to, are you just to the payment that was paid out in June? So that would apply to all of the 77 million paid or offered.
Thank you. So Tanika's got another question about documents and how can people get documents when the Home Office doesn't even have them?
So I think there's also one about 51%, I think, again from Tanika, sorry, reading ahead in the chat, so about the balance of probate. So those two go together. I mean, I explained that where an applicant applies to the scheme, then the caseworkers, they'll have a named caseworker, and we will work with that individual to try and get whatever evidence we can, whether that's about employment in the UK, which shows they were here, whether that's about Department of Work and Pensions, to help them to access either employment or school records. As I said, we need to get to the point where it's just more likely than not what happened. And just to carry on that, where you say, I think 51%, it seems to be different in the experience of people who are receiving rejection letters, if I read that properly. But the other thing I would say, and I said this at the last meeting, that if you're not happy with the decision that you get, there is firstly, there's an independent review called a tier 1 review. And if you're still not happy at the end of that review, you can then go to a completely separate review by an independent adjudicator, a tier 2 review. And if you're still not happy at the end of the tier 2 review, you can ask your MP to refer the claim to the parliamentary ombudsman. That has to that last bit is out of our control. It needs to go through the MP. So it isn't just if someone gets a rejection, that's all you can do. There are opportunities for independent reviews of those decisions, and they're completely reviewed afresh, and you'll get an updated decision if you choose to do that. Sorry, Laura.
That's okay. So Katie Wilson Downey has also asked to make it clearer about the close family members' claims in their own right, to say that a close family member of any primary claimant can also be eligible if they have been impacted also. So can
that is a really important point. It was actually on the slide, if you remember, the three, it was primary members, primary claimants, the estates claims, and close family members. And interestingly and importantly, in August last year, we actually changed the rules to put in a whole new category, so people can claim living costs as close family members, because of the feedback we'd had from claimants and stakeholders, because they were telling us that quite often, if they'd had to look after a person, they had to pay out expenses from their own pocket. If they're a close family member of that claimant who had a loss due to an inability to demonstrate the lawful status, as Katie Wilson-Danny says, then if you're that close family member, you can make a claim under the scheme. And as I say, from August last year, and we're going back over the old claims, there is a brand new category of living costs for those close family members to claim.
Right. Bev DeLucy asks about if people have left no will, how do you handle the probate?
Marianne, do you want to put that out?
Yeah, so there's 2 ways into that. So when people submit an estates claim form, then we do check to see whether probate is on there if it's required, and also whether we work with the individuals or their advocates to see whether we can get that information. So but before the claim is eligible, because the eligibility for the deceased estates is based on the individual who has submitted the claim, and they have to be the correct person who would be the person that would administer the estate. So that goes through to part of our team on the front end, and they liaise with the customer to explain to them how they can get the probate, and we work closely with the probate office as well. We also have the option that people can go to We Are Digital, and they can help people complete the required forms for probate and send those off via us to the probate office. And if people are able to do it that way, then the payment is made by the Home Office in the first instance for the probate application. And it can be very tricky because as I'm sure you'll all have experience of, for some people there are quite large family groups, so quite a number of siblings, brothers, sisters, etc. And for them to work out who is the person who would be the right person to administer the probate if the will hasn't been left can be quite challenging, and sometimes we have to work with more than one person to try to establish that. But yeah, so there is support on probate. Unfortunately, quite a lot of our older claims are probate because we've had to work through different estate claims, but we are putting additional resource into that, and we are moving those forward more quickly now. And it is also dependent on the individual, because sometimes when we go to people and have those conversations, they're not necessarily ready to send that information back into us. So we do give people quite a lengthy time to be able to put the probate claim in, because naturally for some people it can be quite distressing as well.
Okay, Lorna, thank you, because I know you've got to go and it's 5 to 8, so thank you for that. We'll
There's just one more question, and then I'll hand over to you, Desmond. It's just about the We Are Digital. Is there any way of finding out their focus, whether they focus on Europeans and not Windrush victims? And that was by Katie Wilson-Downing as well.
So again, we Are Digital are an organisation that supports more widely than just the Windrush scheme, but they have different people working in different locations supporting different types of work. So they do offer a digital work for quite a lot of the different parts of the business, including European, but that isn't anything to do with the Windrush, and we've been very clear that we aren't part of that procurement to get the tenders and to get the business working, and we've separated ourselves from that, and we just work with We Are Digital from a commercial aspect to make sure that the requirements for Windrush are met, because we don't want a digital offering with them because our forms aren't digitalised, and people do need a different approach. So we've taken ourselves out of the umbrella of We Are Digital, working with the Home Office on the European and on a couple of other areas, and we focus with different people within that team on the Windrush scheme. And we have our own people that have been identified within We Are Digital at a senior level as well, who work closely with us. And again, their work doesn't cover any of the European work or any of the other contracts.
Thank you. I'm going to hand over to Desmond. Thanks for answering those questions.
Right, thank you, Lorna. Thank you for those who have been waiting patiently. So if you've got questions you need to ask, please hold your hands up. One thing I'm going to say here, and we've been doing this at public meetings as well, questions are there to be asked. If you wish to make a statement, this is not the platform. This is the platform to ask questions, because there are people on the call who want to ask questions. So first of all, good evening and welcome back, Richard Black. To you first.
Pleasant good evening, everybody.
Hi.
It's nice to see you again, brother Desmond. Nice to see you, man. And I'm happy that you're conducting these meetings faithfully. I have a question for Mr. Hills, right? And my question is very simply this, Mr. Hills. This Windrush situation, right? Or debacle, whatever you want to call it, has been going on for nearly 6 years plus now. And my problem with it is this, right? And something came up a while ago, and I was listening to the introduction to the what your people were doing, and the word scheme was used multiple times. And my understanding of a scheme, right? My rudimentary understanding of a scheme is to make plans, especially in a devious way, or we intend to do something illegal or wrong. I now understand why people from Nigeria and other African countries and Caribbean people and getting no justice. Why are we going through this nearly 6 years, probably 7 years on? Why is there no justice? Why are we still begging for justice? Why is this going on for so long? I mean, why is it called a scheme? I understand now, because people are being purposely defrauded. People are being intentionally wronged. Why?
Okay.
All right,
Thanks,
that's enough
Richard.
of that. That's enough of that. Rio?
Thanks, Richard. Over to Nigel or Marion. Do you want to respond to the
I'll
question?
repeat. We only want questions in relation to the application and its processes. We don't want people giving speech.
Can I? Yeah. I mean, I would say that. I mean, the reason we're on these calls is to listen. And I said at the Windrush National Organisation Conference in October, if we don't have difficult conversations, then we won't make any progress. I appreciate there's a lot of frustration and anger. What I would say is that, as what I've said, you know, my team are doing the best they can to get the maximum award available at the earliest point possible. You know, I'm only here in the Windrush compensation scheme to respond to those people who cannot and have not been able to demonstrate their lawful status in the UK. I and my team are genuinely trying to do that as honestly, as quickly and effectively as we can. And frankly, some of the, like we spoke about the independent earlier, some of the information that's in the public makes that harder for people to trust and to apply and for us to work through that scheme. But I understand the frustration and anger. But what I'm keen to do is to try and move through as effectively and constructively as we can to get to a point where as many people can be held by the scheme as possible.
Okay.
And Bishop Joe, there were a couple of other questions in the sidebar. I don't know whether I could, in just 2 seconds, I could just cover off.
Yeah, provide us a couple of seconds. Yeah, we got
So
3 hands.
just to say, and again, I think it looks like a couple from Katie Wilson down here. I know Tonika said she'd pick hers up in the speech. So just to say, I mean, it's been said with due respect, I admit that the Windrush scheme don't know enough about impacts of life. I've never said that, and we take a lot of effort to train and to involve our teams in getting the information from claimants that we can. But just going back to there are a couple there from, I think, about claims that should be reviewed, claims that nil awards where we look at them, just to reinforce that independent review I mentioned earlier, the tier 1, the tier 2 to the independent adjudicator, and if you're really still not happy, to the parliamentary ombudsman, is there to protect the integrity of those concerns if you don't believe you've given a fair decision by the caseworker. So those are the avenues of review. Hope that's helpful.
Okay. Thank you. We'll go to Deepak. You had your hand up next, then Bev, then it will be Glenda Caesar.
Hello, my friends. Just to say, I think you know that I've been talking about this community engagement fund for some time regularly. Sadly, it's the first time that I've heard that it's been relaunched, and I heard that the closing date is pretty sharp, really. So I was wondering if there's any extra help that we could get to try and develop an application that would then help the scheme, people who have been affected, and ensure that there is fairness in what we're trying to endeavour to do. So really, I'm glad that the Community Engagement Fund has been relaunched. I was wondering, following this meeting, if I can connect with anybody particularly to look at the gaps and how we can help to ensure that those gaps are sort of communicated well and better, really.
Maria, can you pick that one up?
Yes, certainly, Deepak, if you can share your information. So what I can do is, as I said, we had 2 awareness sessions this week, but I'm happy to run through the information about the Community Engagement Fund and how to apply and what the criteria is and what needs to be submitted.
I think there was another comment in the sidebar. Just to clarify, it isn't excluding the Caribbean community. All communities can apply. I don't know where that crossover came from, so we can provide that information.
I just put my email address in the chat bar. Okay, is that okay?
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you.
Thank you. That's all.
Okay. All right. Thank you for that. We're going to Bev DeLucia. Good evening. If you want to unmute yourself. You're still on mute, Bev. Well, Bev, whilst you're...
Can you hear me?
I can hear you now.
Okay. My claim for my deceased parents been going on for nearly a year now. And I had certain concerns. I'm addressing this to Nigel about how some of these claims are being processed. Now, because my mum and dad didn't leave a will, it has to go through probate. Since I've been doing these claims, I've had complaints, and including myself, they don't call you back. They've sent me the wrong forms. Oh, I'm ever so sorry. The We Are Digital that I spent 2 hours wasted because the woman English was not her first language. When she finished the forms, she sent me a copy of one which had so many spelling mistakes on it, it could not be sent to the probate office. I then got a form. When they did send me the correct probate forms, okay, on the front of it, I've got one here. This is the probate form. And it says on there, you have to do a checklist. Before you send your application to the HMCTS probate, you will need to enclose the following. If you do not enclose required documents, it will delay your application. And it clearly states on the front of the form, an official copy, not a photocopy, of the death certificate is required. I took this form, I filled both of them in, and I sent the original, that's the back of the original death certificates, but then there was no address to send it to. So I called Windrush and I said, where do I send these probate forms to? He said, and I wrote it down, send it to Windrush. That's the address he gave me. He sent it there, long story short. 4 weeks later, I heard nothing. So I called Windrush and I spoke to the same guy and he said, oh, your forms are still here. I then asked him, why are my forms still here? What he actually did, I was so angry. I was absolutely spitting nails. I was so angry. He'd taken out the original death certificates, which I sent with these forms, photocopied it and sent photocopies with the probate form, which the probate office will reject because it says do not send photocopies. What I want to ask Nigel is, I called them back. I called Windrush back and I asked him.
Bev, can we get to the question? Because, you know, we got 15 minutes.
I asked him, why did you do this? Why did you take out the original form, the original death certificate, and put a photocopy in there? He said, take it up with the probate office. I said, no, probate didn't do this. Nigel, I want to ask you, can he do that? And they are delaying my claim. It's been nearly a year. What happens when the Windrush caseworker tampers with your claim?
So I can hear your anger and your frustration. I mean, Marianne manages the front end team, and we will find out what happened. I mean, I just can't, you know, without knowing all the detail, but I'll find out what happened and I will come back to you separately.
I've sent a complaint in. They don't answer complaints. He's delayed my claim. You can't alter things in somebody's claim. I'm sure it's illegal. You can't take out things.
He said he will look at it and get back to you.
All right, let's move on. Thank you for whoever that was. We're going to go to, where were we? Glenda Caesar.
Hi, Nigel and Marion. Can I just say something, Nigel, in relation to how we started this about the article that was put, I think, in the Independent about the non-scaling back of the scheme. Thank you for explaining it, but is this going to go out public so that other people know? Because we haven't had anything in the papers to explain this, or even Lord Murray hasn't even responded to say it's untrue or it's not true. We only know because you've told us this evening, but that's not my question. But it would be.
I mean, press office have got in contact with the Independent, because it is patently. I mean, it is unhelpful. Even if you look at the quote, you know, the misquote. I think it was quoted as, one of the quotes was, you know, that Lord Murray said that people haven't suffered loss or detriment. I mean, I could pick that up as well. That clearly we accept people have suffered loss or detriment, and that this scandal has hurt a lot of people and there's been a lot of trauma. What the letter actually was talking about was that conversion of the numbers of people who have applied to the status scheme into the compensation scheme. And what it said was that the experience is that even when the people who applied to status, a good number of them haven't suffered that loss or that inability to demonstrate their lawful status that has impacted them financially or on their impact of life. So the problem is there have been a number of articles and comments in the paper and in different areas where people have either taken out of context or are very unhappy about the scheme, and it's very difficult to counter all of those, because, you know, in some cases people just won't believe the facts that the Home Office put forward. All I can do is just get on and deliver the scheme as effectively as I'm able, and hope that some of the information that goes out publicly doesn't scare people and deter them from applying to the scheme. Because that's my worry, that, you know, in people's genuine desire sometimes to challenge the scheme, you know, sometimes that can have the impact of either people applying who are just not entitled, which is traumatic, but also, more importantly, you know, people being worried about applying and not applying to the scheme, and then I can't help them if they don't apply to the compensation scheme.
I understand that now, but I think, you know, and Dawn's also put in the chat that we do need it to go out publicly so that everyone is informed about it. Because once you see Simon Murray on there, then other people will take it in a different way. But I understand, but that isn't my question to you. I just wanted that clarification. My question to, I think it goes to Marion, is what is the deadline for the response to someone, if it's a new claimant or a close family member has put in a new claim? How long does it take before they get a response back to say they're eligible and that they're entitled to the interim payment? What is the timeline? What's the period?
So the timeline, sorry, hi Glenda, hope you're well.
Hi Miriam, I'm fine, thank you.
Good. So the timeline will be, it all depends on how many claims there are. So if we have a high influx of claims, then they will take longer to input, because obviously we only have a limited resource to do that, inputting and registering of the claims. But in general, we aim to, once the eligibility is confirmed, be able to provide that preliminary payment within 6 weeks. But the eligibility element can take up to between 4 and 6 weeks to be able to confirm eligibility. Obviously, that isn't the case for people who've been through the scheme because the eligibility is also already there. But you should be looking at within sort of between 10 to 12 weeks to be able to get the preliminary payment decision.
Okay, thanks for that. I'm going to move on quickly now. We've got Tanika, you're next. And please, I'm going to insist now before we go to Tanika, questions only. If I start hearing statements, I'm just going to put anyone on mute because we've got to get through the people who have got their hands up. Tanika.
Thanks, Desmond. Hi, Nigel and Marion. And apologies if you guys, this is my statement, Desmond. I have to make it early with my questions. But my question is going back to something I asked in the chat. I had written to the Home Office. It says that your records only go back to 1985. People came 1948 to 1988 versus January 1989. Specifically for deceased estate claims, I and my colleagues have found it particularly difficult to gather information for people who've died 20, 30 years ago to demonstrate what they've experienced during the period of 1948 to 1988. When I do subject access request, information is coming back. I'm sorry, no information on this person. I have physical evidence in front of me that this person was here in 1973, spent however long. Their ILR may have lapsed because they went overseas. Now they're trying to come back maybe as a returning resident or again, deceased estate. The main point in question is the evidence. If your records only go back to 1985, how realistically, on the balance of probabilities, do you expect people to find information that is just not there? And then when I asked that question to your team, I was told to contact the National Archive. They only have information on people who've naturalized, not people who would have made applications or any information other than that on people during the period of 1948 to 1988. Equally, local authorities, some are not in operation anymore, or they don't have records dating back to then from we're in 2023 now. So again, how can you guys help with evidential burdens claimants are put through both overseas returning residents and deceased estates? Those are two really difficult things that we're experiencing as advocates.
Thank you, Tanika.
Thanks.
Nigel, Gabby.
Want to start? Marianne?
Sorry, I was coming off mute again. So thank you for your question. And I think I don't have an answer to that at the moment, but it is something that we'll take back and look at what those challenges are for people. We obviously, the requirement for probate is a probate office requirement to enable us to be able to consider people in the deceased estates. So I think the best thing that we can do is take that away with us. And potentially, if we could kind of get the question or just have a chat or an email about that, then I'd be happy to pick that up with you separately.
And
Thank you. Sorry, go ahead, Nigel.
On the wider question, I mean, that is why we apply only the balance of probabilities. I mean, the early part of the scheme, the burden was wrongly and was much higher, and that was changed. And that's why we have the engagement with the DWP and the HMRC, and we self-evidently do get information, whether that be passports that people arrived on or information on. I mean, you said you had some information on some of those individuals in front of you about coming to the UK. I mean, the key is to get as much information as you as we can, and to try and piece that together, and to get to the point where we can see on the balance of probabilities that what we think happened, and we can either issue a status document or we can proceed with compensation. But
and I can
appreciate it's very difficult.
Yeah, I'm going to stop there because I need to get through these questions. Thank you, Tanika. Cassandra.
Shalom, good evening, everyone. First of all, my first question, kind of really simple and pragmatic. Both the Home Office and the Windrush National Organisation, do you have a fact sheet or a website specifically for the frequently asked questions, rather than just say something that is probably already out there because a lot of people want to know it? Do you have any way to just quickly signpost me to that?
I can answer from our perspective. We're a little behind, but from the previous meetings, all the question and answers are posted on our website. I think we're about 2 months behind on that because of administrational issues, but we are going to bring those up to date very shortly. But importantly, the video recordings, we try and put them up now the same night immediately after the meeting. So at least there is an official record there of the questions which are asked at the meeting.
And Cassandra, in terms of the scheme, all of the casework guidance is available. You just put Windrush casework guidance, it comes up on gov.uk, and we publish every month. We publish a fact sheet and statistics about where the scheme is up to, and there's also, Bishop Dedman, there's a pack, I think, a kind of an information pack that includes the kinds of videos and leaflets and things, Marianne, that we can share, isn't there?
Great.
Yes, yeah. A partner pack we're able to share.
Is there any acknowledgement of the psychological and emotional trauma of having to maybe gather evidence for a deceased relative, and also for claimants who are rejected? Is there any aftercare or any, say they're unsuccessful getting their compensation, but they're experiencing a trauma, disgruntled feelings, anger, frustration? It's not good for them to just walk around in the community holding these feelings. Do you signpost them to anywhere they could sort of offload any talking therapy afterwards? Because not everyone is successful. You know, as we hear, some of why maybe people are speaking out is because they've got these repressed feelings about not being heard, not being understood, their evidence not being adequate. So do you provide specifically to the Home Office, in this sense, any duty of care to their mental health, their emotional health, their psychological health? Because, you know, as a demographic, we've already experienced a lot of trauma. Windrush itself, just reliving that is trauma, having to go through your deceased loved ones in order to advocate for them whilst they're an ancestor is also traumatic, let alone at the end of that being found to be unsuccessful. So do you have anything in place for them to be able to cope with that after that long journey?
Thanks, Cassandra. Nigel, Marianne?
Yes, so thank you for your question. So yes, we at the moment what we have in place is the vulnerable persons team who support people who during the journey need additional help. So during their claim process, they need additional help. One of the things that we are putting in place, and we've completed the recruitment and we've just gone into training for the individuals, is having people who will be the person who is like, we're calling them like a claimant contact person. So when a claim comes in, at a very early age, it will be picked up by somebody who won't be caseworking that claim, but they'll be in contact with the individual throughout their journey. And one of the things that we can use that person for is to identify during the process, as they build their relationship and they're regularly in touch, whether there are any other issues or challenges for the person that they need assistance with, and we can signpost appropriately or try to offer assistance through the vulnerable persons team. At the end of the client journey, we've just introduced over the last few months signposting for people who have been successful and offered an award, and we've started with that cohort because in the same way that you mentioned about people who've been through trauma, everything is the same and it still applies to people who have received an award, of course, and signposting them if they need any assistance with, you know, getting quite a large amount of money into their bank account. What do they, you know, how they wish to deal with that. And as I said, it is soft signposting where we give them some options and they don't need to take those options, but we have received good feedback from that. And we want to build on that through the customer contact people to be able to see that person right through to the end of their claim journey and then be able to have that conversation when somebody doesn't receive an award and talk them through that, through the appeals process as well, should they wish to appeal, but also then be able to signpost them if they need some additional support.
Okay, thanks, Mary. And now we've got the last three questions. We're going to go to Roland, Roland, Egbert, and Mary. Those are the orders the hands came in. Roland, question, please.
Good evening. Can you hear me okay, Bishop and everyone else?
Yes, good evening.
Good afternoon. Good evening, Nigel and Marian, the Home Office team. Now, Nigel, last year, January 24th or 22nd, I can't remember, January last year, changes were made that impacted those who left the UK for more than 2 years and their indefinite leave lapse. They can return for, apply for the returning resident visa, or whether that change impacted whether or not they get compensation. Now, regarding returning resident visa for those who their indefinite leave lapse, earlier on you said around about 4 weeks, within 4 weeks, the application should be processed. If an individual has made an application and they are waiting for a long period of time, i.e., let's say from last December, when they've had all the relevant documentation, prove definitively that they've got close family members in the UK, etc., and they're still waiting. Can that individual make an application for compensation for impact on life for the long period of time they have had to wait? And please bear in mind what I mentioned regarding the changes that were made in January of last year. I hope you understand the question. I didn't want to do too much of a preamble because I know time is limited. Thank you.
Thank you, Roland.
So I'd say, sorry, I know it's short of time, but I'd say three quick answers to that. That if it has been outstanding, I know, Mr. Housen, you have been in contact about one particular claim. I saw that update earlier on. So if it has been outstanding for a length of time and you want to write in, and I'll just give those details to Bishop Jaddy, we can check where that's up to. I mean, I expect it would not have been as straightforward as you described if it's taken that length of time, but we can look at that. Secondly, on the delay, so the Windrush compensation scheme only covers loss or detriment, impact of life relating to the initial inability to demonstrate a lawful status. But there are other checks and balances. So, you know, for the Ombudsman, for example, I mentioned, holds us to account for delays in the immigration and the decision-making process, and there is a system of challenge separate to the Windrush compensation scheme for that. But as I've said, certainly on the status element, you know, the numbers, as you will see from the published stats, have really reduced. So if it has been delayed, then that would suggest to me that it maybe isn't as straightforward as it might have been.
Okay, thank you for that, Nigel. And I think, Roland, it's important if we get the details in on that and get that followed up. Now, Egbert, you put your hand down. Are you still intending on asking a question or not? If not, I'll go straight to Mary.
You can go to Mary, Desmond. Thanks.
Please. No problem at all. Thank you. Mary, last question's with you. Do you mind putting your camera on? Hi, Mary.
are you hearing me now?
Yes, we are.
Okay, well, hi everyone. I hope you had a great day. And I'm not meaning to offend anyone, but I'm just a thinking person. I'd like to express my thoughts. And I believe that there's a massive injustice between people in the colonies and people in the motherland, because that's what we've been made to believe, that Britain is the motherland. So we have to do everything to support Britain.
We're not,
But
hold on.
the massive injustice.
Hang on. Stop. Rowan, right? If you talk again, Charlie, just take him out the meeting. Please remove him.
Right.
Look, now, hang on, Mary. It's a question, okay? We're coming up to near the end of the meeting.
Right. So the question is, why is it that people from the so-called colonies isn't free to come and go in the mother land as the people from the motherland or countries, the mother country, what is the motherland? Why is it that they are free to go to the colonies? They don't need no passport and no ID. They go with a yacht, they go with a Thomas lift, they go with a bike, and they go and stay as long as they want and do as they please. But when the people from the colonies come here, there's all these restrictions and all these hoops they have to jump through. And I think they should move that restriction about people coming here on a limited visa and period and all this. We build England and we should be able to come free and leave when we please. So that's the massive injustice. The British government need to change that. And if they want to keep that going, they need to encourage the governments in the colonies to put restriction on so-called whites when they go down there with no passport, no ID, and stay in as long as they want. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. I think respectfully, I'm not going to have that question put to the Home Office because I think it's above these guys' pay grade, in all honesty. It requires people to make representations to the overseas governments so that they can clearly hold the British government to account. And it's also the case that we, as campaigners, must hold the political parties to account as well in this country about how people are treated. And people who follow me for many years, I've always said, why is it that Jamaica is one of the only countries in the Caribbean where people need to have a visa to come to the UK? And, you know, we have been saying that for a number of years. But on that note, I just want to thank everyone for their questions. Thank you to the Home Office for attending. We will be going through the chat at the weekend, myself and the Vice Chair, and we will be submitting your questions to the Home Office, things which haven't been picked up tonight in the chat. They will be picked up. I think there was one mistake. When I said there was an admin problem, I mean, we have an admin problem and not the Home Office. So I just wanted to point that out. And one of the things is that I've been quite reasonable tonight because one of the things I'm trying to do is not to be dictatorial with the meetings. And I do apologize for Rowan coming in and talking across, but I try to let people express themselves. But when things are going to get a little bit out of hand, I won't have that. I think free speech is absolutely important, but we must always show each other respect. And I think that's the important thing. We may not have been shown respect as my light goes dimmer, but we have not been shown respect. But clearly, at the end of the day, someone has to be the adult here. And I'm just pointing that out. And what we try to be as an organization, we try to be the adult as much as we possibly can. And on that note, thank you very much, everyone. In terms of the our international conference on the 27th of October, I'm going to ask everyone, put your money where your mouth is. Support the gala dinner. Support the Windrush Welfare Fund as well. We have been helping people. People have come on these calls. They've not got money for food. They contact us privately and we've been assisting them. People have not had accommodation. We have assisted them with accommodation. We've assisted them even with furnishings as well. Now, thank you very much for your comment, Katie. That's greatly appreciated. And we're not speaking to children, but thank you for your observations. The point is this, we're very practical how we do what we're doing. And we will continue to do what we're doing with the dignity, the grace, and the respect that we need to deliver what we are doing. As an organization, we speak with our actions. And speaking with our actions, we have had people that we've been supporting since 2018. And today we continue to support those people as well. when we approach the Home Office, we approach the Home Office with cold, hard facts and not conjecture. And we do that for the simple reason that's how we hold them to account. The purpose of these meetings is to build bridges. And that's the important thing. We build bridges. We're not into, we build bridges. And bear with me 1 minute. Sorry, right. We build bridges, and that's the purpose of the exercise in building bridges. And we will continue to build bridges for our community, because clearly understanding what has happened, the Home Office need to understand what happened to members of our community. And also as well, our community needs to ensure that the Home Office understand how we operate culturally as well. So that's the important thing that we need to get across. It's a two-way process and not a one-way process. I make no apologies for saying that. But our conference this year, we are going to be looking at our community, the relationship with the Home Office and the additional issues. And that's the 27th of October in Birmingham. Please do come along. One thing I'm going to say now as well is I'm going to say as well, publicly, I have removed two people from the meeting this evening. One thing I'm going to say is this: you can say what you want in the chat, but be respectful. And I will not tolerate disrespect in no way, shape or form. And we will continue to do what we're doing. The date of the next meeting, I think was in the chat. I think it's the 21st of September at 7 p.m. So it's Thursday, the 21st of September. And so once again, thank you to the Home Office for attending. Our next face-to-face meeting is the Tuesday, 29th of August in Walsall in the West Midlands. So that encompasses where geographically we are. That encompasses Dudley, which is accessible. Wolverhampton is accessible. Sandwell as well is accessible into Walsall as well. And the Home Office will be in attendance there. I know Nigel won't be there, but the rest of the team will be there as well. And I thought I'd say that because he did say from day one he won't be available on the 29th. So it's just to let you know that. So thank you very much. As we normally start, we'll close in prayer and we'll bid you all good evening. Please bow your heads if you wish to join in. Heavenly Father, thank you for our meeting this evening. Father God, we just give you thanks for understanding. We give you thanks for us having the ability to listen and the ability to answer questions. And Father, as we just move things forward, just bless us that we continue in our fight to seek justice for the Windrush generation. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. God bless you all. Have a wonderful evening. And remember, any information, just visit our website, www.windrushnationalorganisation.com. Thanks very much. Have a good evening all.
Thank you, everybody. Good night.
Good night. Thank you. Thank you very much.